Section V, Nevada State Level Practice Test State Test 11, Commission Duties and Powers, Licensing 11.1 The Nevada Real Estate Commission has how many members? A. 10 members. B. 7 members. C. 5 members. D. 3 members. 11.2 How many real estate commissioners must be from Washoe County? A. None are required to be from Washoe County. B. 1 is required to be from Washoe County. C. 2 are required to be from Washoe County. D. 3 are required to be from Washoe County. 11.3 Real estate commissioners are A. Elected. B. Appointed by the Governor. C. Appointed by the Attorney General. D. Appointed by the District Court. 11.4 Nevada Real Estate Commissioners serve a term of A. 2 years. B. 3 years. C. 4 years. D. 5 years. 11.5 A Nevada Real Estate Commissioner may serve no more than how many consecutive terms? A. 2 consecutive terms. B. 3 consecutive terms. C. 4 consecutive terms. D. 5 consecutive terms. 11.6 A Nevada Real Estate Commissioner must be A. Nevada real estate broker. B. At least a Nevada real estate broker salesperson. C. At least a Nevada real estate salesperson. D. A Nevada real estate licensee for at least 10 years before appointment. 11.7 Carl has been a Nevada real estate commissioner for 2 consecutive terms. How long must he wait before he can serve again? A. He does not have to wait before serving again. B. 1 year. C. 2 years. D. 3 years. 11.8 The Nevada Real Estate Commission A. Adopts regulations. B. Enacts statutes. C. Adjudicates consumer complaints. D. Regulates the conduct of the parties to a real estate transaction. 11.9 Disciplinary hearings of Nevada real estate licensees are conducted by A. Nevada State Courts. B. The Nevada Real Estate Division. C. The Nevada Real Estate Commission. D. The Nevada Attorney General. 11.10 Who approves all real estate pre-license, post-license, and continuing education courses in Nevada? A. Education providers. B. The Nevada Real Estate Division. C. The Nevada Real Estate Commission. D. The Nevada Attorney General. 11.11 The Nevada Real Estate Commission acts in what capacity to the Real Estate Division? A. Supervisory. B. Shared governance. C. Adversary. D. Advisory. 11.12 Who is responsible for the administration of Nevada real estate law? A. The Nevada Legislature. B. The Nevada Real Estate Division. C. The Nevada Real Estate Commission. D. The Nevada Attorney General. 11.13 The head of the Real Estate Division is called the A. Boss. B. Administrator. C. Division Chief. D. Executive in charge. 11.14 The head of the Real Estate Division A. must be affiliated with a real estate brokerage firm. B. must have a 4-year college degree. C. cannot be affiliated with a real estate brokerage firm. D. must be a real estate broker. 11.15 To determine whether a licensee has engaged in misconduct in a transaction, the Real Estate Commission may consider a. Whether the licensee has treated all parties fairly. B. Whether the licensee has a college degree. C. How much the licensee was compensated for the transaction. D. The licensee's brokerage firm's reputation for honesty. 11.16 To determine whether a licensee has engaged in misconduct in a transaction, the Real Estate Commission may consider all of the following except: A. Whether the licensee has ascertained all pertinent facts concerning the property. B. Whether the licensee has disclosed, in writing, his or her interest or contemplated interest in the property. C. Whether the licensee understands and properly applies federal and state statutes relating to the protection of consumers. D. Whether the licensee has communicated with his or her client on a regular basis. 11.17 To determine whether a licensee has engaged in misconduct in a transaction, the Real Estate Commission may consider all of the following except: A. Whether the licensee has a college degree. B. Whether the licensee has impeded or attempted to impede any investigation of the Real Estate Division. C. Whether the licensee has ensured that purchase agreements are in writing. D. Whether the licensee has obtained all changes of contractual terms in writing and whether such changes are signed or initialed by the parties concerned. 11.18 Carl was a commercial agent specializing in leases. He had never done a residential transaction but agreed to represent a friend in the sale of his house. Carl worked closely with a residential agent, and he disclosed his lack of experience to his client friend. Unfortunately, Carl made a lot of mistakes and his client lost a lot of money. Can Carl be disciplined? A. Yes. He should not have acted outside his field of experience. B. Yes, his client was harmed by the mistakes. C. No, making mistakes is not a ground for discipline. D. No, he got assistance from a residential agent and disclosed his lack of experience to the client. 11.19 Betty the broker represented Bernice in the purchase of a home in a rural area. When Bernice asked about the construction behind the property, Betty said, "I think a shopping mall is being built." After moving in, Bernice was upset to learn that actually an industrial plant was being built. Can Betty be disciplined? A. Yes, Betty failed to ascertain pertinent facts about the property. B. Yes, but only if Betty knew an industrial plant was being built. C. No, Betty only said "I think a shopping mall is being built." D. No, Bernice could have discovered the facts herself. 11.20 Sally represented a limited liability company in the sale of a small office building. She did not disclose her 1% ownership interest in the LLC because she was charging a minimal commission, and she did not expect to receive any profit from the sale. Can Sally be disciplined for her failure to disclose? A. No. Her ownership interest is minimal. B. No, she did not expect a profit from the sale. C. No, her client, the LLC, knew of her ownership interest. D. Yes. 11.21 Rhonda, a real estate salesperson, forgot to put an expiration date in a written listing agreement. Can she be disciplined? A. No, it is a minor mistake. B. No, an expiration date is not required. C. Yes. D. Yes, an expiration date is required in all brokerage agreements. 11.22 The maximum recovery from the Education Research and Recovery Fund is how much per claim and per licensee? A $10,000/$25,000 B. $25,000/$50,000 C. $25,000/$100,000 D. $50,000/$250,000 11.23 For how long is a broker required to retain transaction records? A. 5 years B. 6 years C. 7 years D. 10 years 11.24 Which of the following is a basic type of Nevada real estate license? A. Broker salesperson B. Broker in charge C. Broker manager D. Broker affiliate 11.25 Rhonda is helping Brian find and buy a house. Although she does not have a license, Rhonda is performing most, but not all, of the tasks a licensed agent would perform. They haven't discussed it, but Rhonda expects Brian to pay her. Does Rhonda need a license? A. No, there is no agreement she will be paid. B. No, she is not performing all of the tasks a licensed agent would perform. C. No, the expectation of payment is not enough. D. Yes, the expectation of payment is enough. 11.26 Ryan is helping Steven sell his house. They both know that Ryan does not have a real estate license, so they agree that Ryan will be paid a small sum of $500. Steven's house sells and afterwards he refuses to pay Ryan. Can Ryan recover the payment in any lawsuit against Steven? A. No, Ryan must have a real estate license to be paid for performing the services of a real estate licensee. B. No, there is no evidence that their agreement was in writing. C. Yes, they had an agreement, and both of them knew that Ryan did not have a license. D. No, Ryan's payment must be based on a percentage of the sales price. 11.27 Which of the following is exempt from Nevada's real estate license law? A. Appraiser B. Home inspector C. Someone transacting mining claims D. Loan officer 11.28 An attorney involved in a real estate transaction as part of performing her duties as an attorney A. Must have a real estate salesperson's license. B. Must have a real estate broker's license. C. Must have a real estate advisor's permit. D. Is exempt from the Nevada real estate licensing requirement. 11.29 In addition to requiring a real estate license, which of the following requires a permit? A. Commercial real estate B. Property management C. Tax-deferred exchanges D. Residential real estate sales. 11.30 For a business entity to operate as a real estate broker, it must A. Have a net worth of at least $1 million. B. Post a bond with the state. C. Have a designated broker. D. Have its principal place of business in Nevada. 11.31 Sheila helps a friend of hers manage a small apartment building. Sheila does not receive or expect any compensation. Does Sheila need a real estate license and property management permit to conduct this activity legally? A. Yes. B. No, she is not being compensated or expecting any compensation. C. She needs a real estate license but not a property management permit. D. She needs a property management permit but not a real estate license. 11.32 How many hours of pre-license education are required to obtain a real estate salesperson's license? A. 30 hours. B. 60 hours. C. 90 hours. D. 120 hours. 11.33 How many college credits are required to obtain a real estate broker's license? A. 48 credits. B. 64 credits. C. 120 credits. D. 240 credits. 11.34 A person with an inactive license A. may only engage in referrals. B. cannot engage in any activities that require a license. C. may only engage in property management activities. D. must disclose to his client that his license is inactive. 11.35 For how long is an initial real estate license valid? A. 12 months. B. 24 months. C. 36 months. D. 48 months. 11.36 After the first renewal, for how long is a real estate license valid? A. 24 months. B. 36 months. C. 48 months. D. 60 months. 11.37 If a broker lets her license expire, the licenses of the associated licensees are A. unaffected, B. revoked, C. suspended, D. placed on inactive status. 11.38 Sean the salesperson is leaving We Sell Fast Realty to join Down and Dirty Realty. Who is responsible for notifying the real estate division? A. Sean. B. We Sell Fast Broker. C. Down and Dirty Broker. D. The real estate division does not need to be notified. State Test 12, Property Disclosures, Record Keeping, Contracts, Advertising. 12.1 By when must the seller's real property disclosure form be delivered to the buyer? A. Upon acceptance of an offer. B. At least 5 days after acceptance of an offer. C. At least 10 days before the close of escrow. D. At least 5 days before the close of escrow. 12.2 After receipt of a resale package, how long does a buyer have to rescind the transaction? A. 5 business days. B. 5 calendar days. C. 10 business days. D. 10 calendar days. 12.3 The collection of documents that a seller provides to a buyer in a common interest community is called the A. resale package. B. common interest community documents. C. disclosure documents. D. HOA documents. 12.4 After receipt of the seller's real property disclosure form, how long does a buyer have to rescind the transaction? A. 10 calendar days. B. 10 working days. C. 4 calendar days. D. 4 working days. 12.5 Who is responsible for completing the seller's real property disclosure form? A. seller. B. listing broker. C. Buyer's broker D. Property inspector 12.6 surely disclosed in the seller's real property disclosure form a small leak in the garage. Before escrow closed, the defect has become much worse. What should Shirley do? A. Nothing. She has already disclosed the defect. B. Disclose, in writing, that the defect has gotten worse. C. Disclose, orally, that the defect has gotten worse. D. Disclose the worsening defect to her broker but to no one else. 12.7 Which of the following is given by licensees to prospective buyers and sellers? A. Residential disclosure guide. B. Seller's real property disclosure form. C. Resale package. D. Public offering statement. 12.8 The seller's real property disclosure form is required in A. all real estate sales transactions. B. most commercial and residential real estate sales transactions. C. residential sales transactions only. D. all sales of commercial and residential property. 12.9 A resale package is required. A. in all residential sales transactions. B. in all commercial sales transactions. C. in all sales transactions involving a property that has been previously bought and sold. D. in all residential sales transactions where the property is located in a common interest community. 12.10 Which of the following is not included in a resale package? A. minutes of executive board meetings. B. CC and RC. Financial statement. D. Operating budget. 12.11 By statute, who requests the contents of the resale package? A. the unit owner, seller, or his agent. B. the buyer or his agent. C. an escrow officer. D. the ombudsman. 12.12 After receiving a proper written request, how long does a homeowners association have to provide the contents of the resale package? A. 5 days. B. 10 days. C. 2 weeks. D. 3 weeks. 12.13 How long does a buyer have to rescind the purchase after receiving the resale package? A. 3 calendar days. B. 5 business days. C. 1 week. D. 1 month. 12.14 The homeowners association documents are part of the A. seller's real property disclosure form. B. resale package. C. disclosure of material facts. D. declarant's disclosure statement. 12.15 Brianna bought a house from Sherry but did not receive a seller's real property disclosure form. After living in the house for several months, Brianna discovered a defect in the air conditioner which caused her $3,000 to repair. If Brianna can show that Sherry was aware of the defect in the air conditioning, how much money can she be awarded at trial? A. $3,000 plus attorney's fees and costs. B. $6,000 plus attorney's fees and costs. C. $9,000 plus attorney's fees and costs. D. 0. Brianna should not have closed escrow without a seller's real property disclosure form. 12.16 Robert is interested in buying some land which is adjacent to an area where sheep and cattle are allowed to graze. Before Robert signs an offer, what should the seller give him? A. seller's real property disclosure form. B. Resale package C. Open range disclosure D. Residential Disclosure Guide 12.17 What is the record retention period for a broker? A. 7 years B. 5 years C. 4 years D. 3 years 12.18 Broker Betty organizes her files according to the value of the property. Will this satisfy the real estate division's record-keeping requirements? A. Yes. B. No. C. Yes, if all of the relevant records are present. D. Yes, if each file is also dated. 12.19 Roxanne, a real estate salesperson, just entered a written listing agreement with a client. How long does she have to deliver the agreement to her broker? A. 5 calendar days. B. 5 working days. C. 7 calendar days. D. 7 working days. 12.20 Salespeople must maintain records of real estate transactions. A. In the principal branch office from which they operate. B. In the broker's principal office. C. In any location accessible to the real estate division. D. Salespeople are not required to maintain transaction records. 12.21 Real estate brokers must maintain transaction records. A. In the state of Nevada. B. In any location accessible to the real estate division. C. In their principal place of business. D. On a computer server located in Nevada. 12.22 Broker Bernice has given salesperson Sherry sole signatory authority on the brokerage trust account. Which of the following statements is true? A. This is within Bernice's authority as the broker. B. Sherry must have at least 2 years active experience as a salesperson. C. A real estate salesperson may not be the only signatory on a trust account. D. Sherry must post a bond equivalent to the average balance in the trust account. 12.23 Bob the broker advised the real estate division that his records were located in Gabbs, Nevada. Which of the following statements is true about Bob's satisfaction of the record-keeping requirements? A. This is sufficient. B. This is sufficient if he is the only broker in Gabbs. C. This is sufficient if the records are available electronically. D. This is insufficient, because he must advise the division of the exact location of the records. 12.24 Which of the following statements is true about a broker who wants to move the location of his real estate transaction records? A. The records cannot be moved until the real estate division is notified of the new location. B. The broker cannot move the records without the express permission of the real estate division. C. The broker must notify the division within 10 days of moving the records. D. The broker cannot move the records. 12.25 A property manager must maintain how many trust accounts? A. 1 account. B. 2 accounts. C. 3 accounts. D. 4 accounts. 12.26 After receipt of the monthly bank statement, trust accounts must be reconciled within A. 10 days. B. 15 days. C. 30 days. D. 45 days. 12.27 A broker price opinion can prepared A. Only by a broker. B. Only by a broker or a broker salesperson. C. By any real estate licensee. D. Only by an appraiser. 12.28 A broker price opinion cannot be prepared in lieu of an appraisal for approval of a mortgage. B. For a seller to list property. C. For a buyer to buy property. D. For a lien holder. 12.29 Which of the following is not required for a broker price opinion? A. A statement of the intended purpose of the BPOB. The basis used to determine the price opinion. C. Any assumptions or limiting conditions. D. The legal description of the property. 12.30 After receiving a fully executed contract, a licensee has to give the earnest money deposit to her broker or deposit it with the escrow company designated in the contract within a 1 calendar day, b 1 business day, c 3 banking days, d 3 business days. 12.31 Unless otherwise specified in the purchase agreement, the broker in receipt of an earnest money deposit can properly a. Deposit it in his personal account, b. Pay all or a portion of it to the seller, c. Pay all or a portion of it to the buyer, d. Deposit it in the business operating account. 12.32 All advertising done by a real estate salesperson must a. Include the salesperson's license number, b. Include the salesperson's name, c. Include the salesperson's telephone number, d. Disclose the name of the brokerage firm. 12.33 In print advertising, the name of the brokerage firm must be clearly identified. A. With a different color, b. A larger font size, c. With prominence, d. In all capital letters. 12.34 Licensee Richard Smith goes by the nickname Bubba. Which of the following statements is true? A. Richard may use the name Bubba in advertising if he puts it in quotation marks. B. Richard may use the name Bubba in advertising if he puts it in italics. C. Richard can only use his licensed name in advertising, not a nickname. D. Richard can use the name Bubba in advertising if it won't confuse the public. 12.35 Sandra is a broker salesperson with 20 years of experience. Which of the following statements is true about her advertising? A. Her advertising must be done under the direct supervision and in the name of the brokerage with whom the licensee is associated. B. Because she is a broker salesperson, she can advertise solely in her own name. C. Because of her experience, she can advertise without supervision. D. She can advertise without supervision if she also supervises a branch office. 12.36 Rodney, a real estate salesperson, wants to sell his own house. Which of the following may he put on a yard sign? A. For sale by owner. B. For sale by owner occupant. C. For sale by broker owner. D. For sale by owner agent. 12.37 Which of the following is true about a team or group? A. The team or group must be supervised by at least a broker salesperson. B. All members of the team or group must be associated with the same broker. C. The name of the team or group cannot include the name of a member. D. The team must have at least 3 members. 12.38 All of the following are true about a broker's sign except A. It must be placed in a conspicuous place on the business premises. B. It must clearly display the name under which the broker does business. C. It must be readable from the nearest public sidewalk, street, or highway. D. It must be at least 4 feet by 3 feet. 12.39 A real estate broker must give the real estate division a photograph of the broker's sign A. Upon request by the division. B. Every 6 months. C. Annually. D. Biannually. 12.40 Which of the following is true about advertising on the Internet? A. The domain name must include the name of the brokerage firm. B. There are special regulations for advertising on the Internet. C. Advertising must include the name of the brokerage firm. D. Advertising must include an email address. 12.41 Advertising through social media is A. Strictly prohibited. B. Allowed but subject to special regulations. C. Allowed but frowned upon. D. Not mentioned in Nevada statutes or regulations. State Test 13, Agency and Brokerage, Special Topics 13.1 Which of the following must be taught by a broker to associated licensees? A. The legal language of contracts. B. How to use a laptop computer in a listing presentation. C. Ethics of the real estate profession. D. How to get paid without a listing agreement. 13.2 To assist in administering the office, a broker may use a salesperson with at least 2 years active experience. B. A broker salesperson. C. Any licensee with an active license. D. A salesperson or broker salesperson with a business brokerage permit. 13.3 Is a broker required to have a written policies and procedures manual? A. Yes. B. No, but policies and procedures must be established. C. No, but he must have a written policy manual. D. No, but he must have a written procedures manual. 13.4 In establishing policies, rules, procedures, and systems, the broker has to consider all of the following except A. The number of associated licensees. B. The number of employees. C. The number and location of branch offices. D. The brokerage firm's gross revenues. 13.5 Brokers are required to establish a system for monitoring compliance with policies, rules, and procedures. B. A schedule to regularly review and update policies, rules, and procedures. C. A system to regularly test licensees' knowledge of policies, rules, and procedures. D. A procedure to elicit input from licensees into policies, rules, and procedures. 13.6 Scott, a salesperson, has just entered an independent contractor agreement with his broker Brenda. Which of the following must be included in that agreement? A. A statement that Scott can set his own hours. B. A statement that Scott cannot hire assistants to help him with his work. C. A declaration that Scott is not an employee. D. A statement that the broker will supervise associated licensees. 13.7 Brian, a real estate broker, is suing a client for failure to pay him. To claim compensation, Brian must first prove that he has a contract with the client. B. A written contract with the client. C. A broker's license. D. Performed his obligations under their contract. 13.8 Keith, a real estate salesperson, referred a seller to Paula, a real estate salesperson in the same office. It was agreed that Paula would pay, as a referral fee, 25% of any commission she earned to Keith. When Paula's transaction closed, she sent a check to Keith. Which of the following statements is true? A. This is a proper transaction. B. This was improper. The referral fee should have been paid by the escrow officer. C. Referral fees are illegal in Nevada. D. The referral fee should have been paid through Keith and Paula's broker. 13.9 How are fees established for listing agreements and buyer representation agreements? A. They are negotiable between the broker and the client. B. They are established by law. C. The local realtor registered association establishes the fees. D. They are established by agreement among brokers. 13.10 Which of the following is Nevada's agency disclosure form? A. Nevada's agency disclosure. B. Duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee form. C. Consent to act form. D. Agency duties in Nevada form. 13.11 The parties to a brokerage agreement are A. The broker, the salesperson, and the client. B. The salesperson and the client. C. The broker and the client. D. The broker, the client, and the real estate division. 13.12 Which form is used to obtain the written consent for a licensee to act for more than one party to a transaction? A. Dual agency form. B. Consent to act form. C. Multiple representation form. D. Waiver of conflict of interest form. 13.13 Carl, a real estate salesperson, is signing up a client. In what order should he present and have the documents signed? A1. Duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee. 2. The brokerage agreement. B. 1. The brokerage agreement. 2. Duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee. C. 1. Consent to act. 2. Duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee. 3. The brokerage agreement. D. 1. The brokerage agreement. 2. Consent to act. 3. Duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee. 13.14 Sam, a salesperson, has a buyer client who wants to make an offer on a house for sale by the owner. What document must Sammy give to the seller? A. Consent to act. B. A brokerage agreement. C. Duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee. D. Seller's real property disclosure form. 13.15 Which of the following statements is true about the duties owed by a real estate licensee form? A. It creates a contract for services between a real estate broker and a client. B. It can authorize a licensee to act for more than one party to a transaction. C. It can be used as a brokerage agreement. D. It is not a contract for services. 13.16 Bruce, a salesperson, is meeting with a prospective listing client at a restaurant several hours away from his office. The prospective client is ready to sign a listing agreement, but Bruce realizes he forgot to bring a duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee form. What should Bruce do? A. Have the client sign the listing agreement and then sign a duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee form as soon as possible. B. Make arrangements with the client so that the duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee form can be signed before the listing agreement is signed. C. Recite the duties from memory and have the client sign an acknowledgement of oral receipt on any convenient piece of paper. D. Have the client sign a consent to act form in lieu of the duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee form. 13.17 The agency relationship is commonly confirmed for all parties. A. On the duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee form. B. On the consent to act form. C. In the brokerage agreement. D. In the purchase agreement. 13.18 Which of the following is true about a brokerage agreement in Nevada? A. It must be in writing. B. It can be oral or written. C. It must be made on a state-mandated form. D. It is a contract between a client and a real estate salesperson. 13.19 A brokerage agreement is a contract between a client and any licensee. B. Client and a salesperson. C. Client and a broker. D. Customer and any licensee. 13.20 Which of the following is not a brokerage agreement? A. Property management agreement. B. Listing agreement. C. Buyer-broker agreement. D. Oral brokerage contract. 13.21 A brokerage agreement allows a broker to accept compensation. A. Only from the client. B. From the client or another person. C. Only a cooperating broker. D. Only from an escrow officer. 13.22 A brokerage agreement which includes a provision for an exclusive agency representation must A. Be oral. B. Have an automatic extension clause. C. Be in writing. D. Name a definite renewal date. 13.23 Carla, a real estate salesperson, signed a listing agreement with seller Chandra. Who are the parties to the listing agreement? A. Carla and Chandra. B. Carla, Carla's broker, and Chandra. C. Carla and Carla's broker. D. Carla's broker and Chandra. 13.24 An advance fee listing. A. Must be in writing. B. Is illegal in Nevada. C. Must be signed by a broker. D. Must have a termination date of 6 months or less. 13.25 Stephen, a real estate broker, was negotiating an advance fee listing to provide a list of local businesses for sale. Stephen told the client he could produce a list of at least 12 businesses, but that promise was not put into the written agreement they ultimately signed. Stephen produced a list of 10 businesses for sale. Did Stephen breach his agreement with the client? A. No. He made a false representation but did not breach the agreement. B. No. Stephen's statement that he could produce a list of at least 12 businesses was not put into the written agreement. C. No. Stephen's obligations were limited to the terms of the written agreement. D. Yes. Any oral statement made to induce a person to enter an advance fee agreement becomes a part of the agreement. 13.26 Can a real estate licensee be held liable for failure to disclose a defect of which she was unaware? A. No. It is only the seller's responsibility to disclose defects. B. No. It is the responsibility of the property inspector to discover and disclose defects. C. Yes, if she failed to conduct an investigation of the condition of the property. D. Yes, if she should have known about the defect. 13.27 A seller refuses to disclose a water leak in the bathroom and has instructed the listing agent to keep it confidential. In this case, it is the listing agent's duty to A. Keep the leak confidential. B. Disclose the leak to any buyer. C. Report the seller to the real estate division. D. Disclose the leak on the seller's real property disclosure form. 13.28 A real estate broker salesperson is A. Legally liable for her own conduct. B. Not legally liable for her own conduct, only the broker is liable. C. Liable for her own conduct only if retained as an employee. D. Liable for her own conduct only if retained as an independent contractor. 13.29 Which of the following is not a valid relationship between a broker and a client in Nevada? A. Non-agency. B. Single agency. C. Acting for more than one party to the transaction. D. Assigned agency. 13.30 A personal assistant retained by a real estate licensee. A. Must have a real estate license. B. Is not required to have a real estate license. C. Must have a real estate personal assistant license. D. Must have a personal assistant certificate. 13.31 Tiffany is selling her house. Her grandmother has agreed to pay $5,000 of the listing agent's commission. Is the listing agent required to disclose this to a buyer? A. Yes, the listing agent must disclose both the fact that Tiffany's grandmother is contributing to the commission and the amount of the contribution. B. The listing agent must disclose that Tiffany's grandmother is contributing to the commission but she is not required to disclose the amount. C. The listing agent must disclose the amount of the grandmother's contribution but does not have to disclose who is making the contribution. D. The listing agent is not required to disclose anything about who is paying her commission. 13.32 Ramona, a real estate salesperson, discovered a small leak in her seller client's garage. The defect was not disclosed on the seller's real property disclosure form. Her clients told her they did not want the defect disclosed and offered to waive Ramona's disclosure responsibility. Is Ramona required to disclose the defect to a buyer? A. Yes. B. No. The clients have agreed to waive any disclosure duty Ramona has. C. No. It is only a small leak. D. No. Ramona has an absolute duty of confidentiality to her clients. 13.33 Ed, a real estate salesperson, is representing a married couple in the sale of their house. He knows that the couple is in a desperate financial situation. Is Ed required to disclose their desperate financial situation to a buyer? A. Yes. It is a material fact. B. No. It is a private matter. C. No. It is not a material fact relating to the property. D. Yes. It would be fraud to conceal the fact. 13.34 Celeste, a real estate salesperson, represents a buyer. Celeste is a friend of the seller and knows that he is in a desperate financial situation and must sell fast. Assuming this is a material fact, is Celeste required to tell her client buyer? A. No. It is not a material fact relating to the property. B. No. She owes a duty of confidentiality to the seller. C. Yes. It is a material fact concerning the transaction. D. Yes. It is a material fact relating to the property. 13.35 What is a material fact? A. Any information related to the property. B. Any information concerning the transaction. C. Any information. D. Any information that could affect a person's decision. 13.36 Tom, a real estate salesperson, owns a 1% interest in a small corporation. The corporation has asked Tom to list a property the corporation owns for sale. Does Tom have any duty to disclose his 1% ownership in the corporation to prospective buyers? A. No. His ownership percentage is too small to matter. B. Yes. He must disclose it to all parties to a transaction. C. No. It is confidential information between Tom and the corporation. D. No. He is not required to disclose an ownership interest in a business entity. 13.37 Karen, a Nevada real estate licensee, is buying a house. Is she required to disclose that she is a real estate licensee? A. No. She is not representing anyone in the transaction. B. Yes. C. Yes, but only if she is collecting a commission. D. Yes, but only if she is buying property in Nevada. 13.38 Marjorie, a real estate salesperson, represents a buyer. The buyer makes an offer on property listed by another agent in Marjorie's office. If Marjorie's broker does not practice assigned agency, what type of agency relationship does Marjorie have? A. Single agency. B. Acting for more than one party to the transaction, i.e., dual agency. C. General agency. D. Transactional brokerage. 13.39 Bill, a real estate salesperson, represents a seller. A buyer represented by another agent in the same office makes an offer on Bill's listing. Bill's broker assigns Bill to represent the seller and assigns the other agent to represent the buyer. What is Bill's duty to the seller? A. He must present the consent to act form. B. He must present the assigned agency form. C. He must advise the seller that his agency relationship to the seller has changed. D. Bill does not need to do anything in these circumstances. 13.40 Harvey, a real estate licensee, has been representing a seller and a buyer. The buyer decides to make an offer on the seller's property. What must Harvey do? A. He must disclose that he is acting for more than one party to the transaction and obtain the necessary written consent. B. He doesn't need to do anything. C. He must disclose that he is now an assigned agent. D. He must refer one of the clients to another licensee in the office. 13.41 Which of the following is not allowed in Nevada? A. Single agency. B. Acting for more than one party to a transaction, multiple representation. C. Transactional brokerage D. Assigned agency 13.42 Nancy and Pam work as real estate salespeople in the same office. Nancy represents a buyer who wants to make an offer on one of Pam's listings. If the office does not practice assigned agency, what form must the client sign? A. Consent to act form B. Dual representation form C. Multiple representation form D. Assigned agency form 13.43 In Nevada, a client can be independently represented only by a broker, B. a broker salesperson, C. a salesperson, D. him or herself. 13.44 A Nevada real estate licensee owes to all parties to a transaction a duty to exercise a. the utmost skill and care, B. fiduciary duties, C. reasonable skill and care, D. highest standard of skill and care. 13.45 A duty to disclose all sources of compensation is owed by a licensee to a. all parties to a transaction, B. clients only, C. the public, D. other real estate licensees. 13.46 To whom is the duty to disclose material facts concerning the transaction owed? A. all parties to the transaction, B. the client, C. the broker, D. the real estate division. 13.47 Desiree, a real estate salesperson, was asked an accounting question by a client. What is Desiree's duty? A. to answer the question if she knows the answer, B. research the question, then provide an answer, C. ask her broker, D. advise the client to obtain expert advice. 13.48 NRS 252 requires a licensee to provide the appropriate form prepared by the division pursuant to NRS 645.193 to each party for whom the licensee is acting as an agent in the real estate transaction and to each unrepresented party to the real estate transaction, if any. To which form is the statute referring? A. seller's real property disclosure form, B. consent to act form, C. resale package, D. duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee form. 13.49 In what circumstance is the consent to act form used? A. whenever a broker enters a brokerage agreement, B. to obtain authorization for a real estate broker to act for more than one party to a transaction, C. to obtain a client's consent for a broker to act on his behalf, D. when a broker needs a client's consent to perform a special act. 13.50 All of the following are duties of a Nevada real estate licensee except A. to exercise reasonable skill and care, B. to disclose all sources of compensation, C. to conduct an investigation of the condition of the property, D. to disclose material facts relating to the property. 13.51 Doug, a real estate broker, represented a seller in a transaction. After several rounds of negotiations, an agreement was reached with a buyer. Shortly after performance of the agreement commenced, it became apparent that the buyer did not financially qualify to purchase the property. Should Doug have determined the buyer's financial condition before entering the agreement? A. Yes. This is part of Doug's duty to all parties to exercise reasonable skill and care. B. Yes. This is part of Doug's duty to his client to exercise reasonable skill and care to carry out the terms of the brokerage agreement. C. Yes. A listing agent has a specific duty to determine the financial qualifications of a buyer. D. No. A licensee does not have a duty to conduct an independent inspection of the financial condition of a party to the real estate transaction. 13.52 Which of the following is a duty owed by a real estate licensee to a client but not to other parties to the transaction? A. Maintain confidentiality. B. Exercise reasonable skill and care. C. Disclose all sources of compensation. D. Disclose material facts he knows or should have known relating to the property. 13.53 By statute, to whom does a real estate licensee owe a duty to disclose all material facts he knows concerning the transaction? A. All parties to the transaction. B. His client. C. His broker. D. The real estate division. 13.54 Francis, a seller, has just entered escrow with a buyer. Shortly thereafter, her broker, Evan, receives another offer, but it is not as good as the contract in escrow. What should Evan do with the offer? A. Since it isn't as good as the contract in escrow, he can ignore it. B. He can ignore it because there is already a deal in escrow. C. He must present it to Francis. D. He must wait until the escrow closes and then present it to Francis. 13.55 Janet has her client's property listed for $350,000. She has received two offers. One is an offer for $50,000 and the other is for $350,000. Does Janet need to present the $50,000 offer? A. No, but she needs to tell her about it. B. No. She has a full price offer and doesn't need to mention the $50,000 offer. C. No. It would be violating her duty to obtain the best offer to present the $50,000 offer. D. Yes. She must present all offers. 13.56 Jerry, a real estate broker, wants to represent the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. Which document must be signed by the parties to authorize her to represent both of them? A. Consent to act. B. Duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee. C. Dual agency authorization. D. Multiple representation authorization. 13.57 Denise, a real estate salesperson, just received an offer on property she has listed. When must she present the offer to her client? A. Within 1 calendar day. B. Within 1 business day. C. As soon as practicable. D. As soon as reasonably possible. 13.58 Nevada's subdivided land law is applicable, subject to exemptions, when a property is divided or proposed to be divided into how many lots or parcels? A. 25 or more. B. 35 or more. C. 50 or more. D. 100 or more. 13.59 Which document must be reviewed with the prospective original buyer of a timeshare? A. Public offering statement. B. Property report. C. Timeshare prospectus. D. Timeshare disclosure statement. 13.60 In Nevada, water rights are governed by a The doctrine of riparian rights. B. The doctrine of prior appropriation. C. Public use principles. D. Fairness and equity principles. 13.61 A sales agent is licensed to make sales of a residential property, but not commercial property. B. Subdivided land. C. Timeshares and campground memberships. D. Commercial property, but not residential property. Section 6, Nevada License Examination Simulation Test Nevada Practice Exam S1. A farmer temporarily installs produce coolers in a leased farm stand in order to prevent spoilage. The coolers would be considered which of the following? A. Trade fixtures that are real property. B. Trade fixtures that are personal property. C. Temporary real property. D. Emblements. S2. Property can be converted from real to personal property and from personal property to real property by means of which processes, respectively? A. Assemblage and plottage. B. Application and dissolution. C. Severance and affixing. D. Planting and harvesting. S3. The highest form of ownership interest one can acquire in real estate is the A. Legal life estate. B. Conventional life estate. C. Defeasible fee simple estate. D. Absolute fee simple estate. S4. The distinguishing feature of a defeasible fee simple estate is that A. It can be passed on to heirs. B. It has no restrictions on use. C. The estate may revert to a grantor or heirs if the prescribed use changes. D. It is of unlimited duration. S5. Maria acquires a property from her uncle Alfonso. When Maria dies, the estate will pass to Alfonso's other niece, Serena. The type of estate that Maria has in the property is A. Conventional life estate. B. Legal life estate. C. Fee simple defeasible estate. D. Tenancy by the entire ties. S6. One difference between a cooperative estate and a condominium estate is that A condominium owner owns a unit of airspace whereas the co-op owner owns a proprietary lease. B. A condominium sale adversely affects other unit owners. C. The COOP owner owns stock and a freehold real estate interest whereas the condominium owner simply a proprietary lease. D. The condominium owner owns the common elements and the airspace whereas the COOP owner only owns the apartment. S7. Who are the essential parties involved in an estate in trust? A. Owner, trustor, and lawyer. B. Owner, trustor, and trustee. C. Trustee, title company, and beneficiary. D. Trustor, trustee, and beneficiary. S8. A condominium owner enjoys a share in an association that owns one's apartment. B. Tenancy in common interest in airspace and common areas of the property. C. Fee simple ownership of the airspace in a unit and an undivided share of the entire property's common areas. D. Fee simple ownership of a pro rata share of the entire property. S9. With various types of junior liens, the order of payment priority is generally established according to A. The date of recordation. B. What form of tax is in question. C. The order of disbursement. D. Whether the lien was subordinated. S10. What is a lien theory state in contrast to a title theory state? A state in which liens are given priority over other encumbrances. B. A state in which a mortgagor retains title to the property when a mortgage lien is created. C. A state in which the holder of a mortgage lien receives title to the mortgaged property until the debt is satisfied. D. A state in which liens must be recorded to be enforceable. S11. A property owner has an easement appurtenant on her property. One day the property is sold to another party who is opposed to the easement. Following the closing, this particular form of easement A terminates. B transfers with the property. C transfers with the owner to a new property. D becomes a license on the property. S12. What fundamental legal purpose is fulfilled by title records? A. Keeping the county apprised of tax payments. B. Preventing identity theft. C. Giving constructive notice of one's rights and interests in the property. D. Assembling all relevant documents in a single place. S13. What is chain of title? A. The list of all parties who have ever owned real estate. B. The bundle of rights linked to the recorded title to a parcel. C. A chronology of successive owners of record of a parcel of real estate. D. Involuntary conveyance of title by statutory rules of descent. S14. Which of the following provides the strongest evidence of marketable title? A. A general warranty deed. B. A title certificate. C. Title insurance. D. An attorney's opinion. S15. A store owner enters into a lease that charges rent per square foot, a common area fee, and a portion of the store owner's gross income from the property. This kind of lease is A triple charge, or triple net lease. B. Proprietor's lease. C. Percentage lease. D. Retailer's gross lease. S16. An owner leases a property to a business in exchange for rent. The tenant is required to pay all operating expenses as well. This is an example of A proprietary lease. B. Percentage lease. C. Gross lease. D. Net lease. S17. A lease automatically terminates under which of the following circumstances? A. The tenant fails to pay rent. B. The leased property is foreclosed. C. The tenant goes out of business. D. The landlord cancels the lease. S18. A county or municipal authority usually grants a certificate of occupancy for new construction only after A. All contractors' work has been inspected. B. All work has been completed for at least 60 days. C. The construction conforms to building codes. D. The tax assessor has valued the improvement. S19. A property owner is precluded by deed restriction from developing a 30-foot boat dock. The limitation prompts the owner to sell to another party. The new owner A is free to build the dock since the next door neighbor built a similar dock 2 weeks later. B takes title subject to the same restriction. C can build the dock with special permission from the zoning board. D may build, since the restriction is extinguished by the sale. S20. Emily sells Ricole a property containing a deed condition. The condition stipulates that the forested portion of the property must never be razed for development. 3 months later, Recole proceeds to harvest the trees and turn the area into an executive golf course. What recourse, if any, does Emily have under the deed condition? A. She has the right to repossess the property because the grantee has violated the condition. B. The condition has ceased to apply because she allowed the violation to continue for a certain period of time. C. She can claim the proceeds from the harvested trees. D. She can force Recole to sell the property to a new owner who agrees to comply with the condition. S21. What is the essential purpose of legal descriptions of real property? A. To create a consistent, unchanging standard for uniquely locating a property. B. To enable courts and attorneys to calculate property size accurately. C. To comply with common law for real property. D. To eliminate cumbersome metes and bounds descriptions. S22. Which of the following characterizes metes and bounds descriptions? A. They use meridians and baselines. B. They identify an enclosed area, beginning and ending at the same point. C. They use lot and block numbers. D. They incorporate elevation into the descriptions. S23. A buyer agrees to all terms of a seller's offer except the length of time for a contingency to procure financing. The buyer extends the financing period in the offer by 1 week, signs the form, and mails it back to the seller. At this point, the seller's offer A is void. B becomes an executory contract. C becomes a counter-offer. D has been accepted, since the modification was a contingency. S24. Real estate contracts that are not personal service contracts A may be assigned. B are not assignable. C must be in writing. D are exempt from the statute of frauds. S25. Which of the following contracts must be in writing to be enforceable? A parole contract. B a 6-month lease. C a 2-year lease. D an executory contract. S26. Agent Bob, who works for Broker Bill, obtains an owner listing to lease a building. Bill's other agent, Sue, locates a tenant for Bob's listing. Broker Bill in this instance is A an implied agent. B a dual agent. C a single agent. D a subagent. S27. A transaction broker should disclose his or her agency relationship to prospective buyers and sellers A upon first substantive communication. B upon completion of the listing agreement. C immediately following completion of any offer. D immediately prior to closing. S28. A transaction facilitator in a residential transaction represents A the seller, B the buyer, C both seller and buyer, D neither seller nor buyer. S29. A principal instructs an agent to inform minority buyers that the property for lease was just leased an hour ago and is no longer available. The agent refuses to comply. In this case, A the agent should exercise caution until the listing expires, then decline to renew it. B the principal has proposed an illegal act, which should not be obeyed. C. The agent is liable for breaching the listing terms. D. The agent may sue the principal for discrimination and misrepresentation. S30. The amount of a real estate broker's commission is established by an agreement among competing brokers. B. Negotiation with clients. C. The local board of realtors registered. D. State real estate license law. S31. A client revokes an exclusive right to sell listing 2 months prior to expiration. The reason stated, the client is too busy to meet with the agent. In this case, A. The client is criminally liable for negligence. B. The client may be liable for a commission and marketing expenses. C. The agent can sue the client for specific performance, even if no customer had been located. D. The agent must accept the revocation without the possibility of damage recovery. S32. A protection period clause in an exclusive listing provides that A. The owner is protected from all liabilities arising from the agent's actions performed within the agent's scope of duties. B. The agent has a claim to a commission if the owner sells or leases to a party within a certain time following the listing's expiration. C. Agents are entitled to extend a listing agreement's term if a transaction is imminent. D. An owner is not liable for a commission if a prospective customer delays in completing an acceptable offer. S33. Real estate advertising must conform to regulatory standards and requirements. One requirement is a broker may only place blind ads in social media outlets. B. A broker must have all advertising approved by the local real estate board. C. The advertising must not be deceptive. D. Sales agents may only advertise in their own name. S34. The 3 principal brokerage firms in a market agree to pay sales agents 15% more than any other competitor currently in practice. This is an example of a collusion. B. Price fixing. C. Allocation of markets. D. Steering. S35. 2 leading agencies jointly agree to raise commissions charged to residential sellers to 7.5% of the sales price. Which of the following is true? A. This is a perfectly legitimate business practice. B. The brokers have illegally fixed prices. C. The brokers have allocated markets. D. The brokers have engaged in legal collusion. S36. A sale contract contains an open-ended financing contingency. If the buyer cannot obtain financing within a reasonable time, the deal is off. 6 months later, the buyer still cannot secure financing. Which of the following is true? A. The seller may cancel the contract, since it can be ruled invalid. B. The buyer can continue indefinitely to seek financing, and the seller's property must remain off the market, since reasonable is not defined. C. The escrow agent is entitled to the buyer's deposit. D. The seller can force a lender to commit to a loan under fair financing laws. S37. In the event of a buyer's default, a provision for liquidated damages in a sale contract enables a seller to sue the buyer for specific performance. B. Force the buyer to quit claim equitable title. C. Sue the buyer for the broker's marketing expenses. D. Claim the deposit as compensated damages for the buyer's failure to perform. S38. Which of the following is true of an option to buy agreement? A. The potential buyer, the optionee, is obligated to buy the property once the option agreement is completed. B. The optioner must perform if the optionee takes the option, but the optionee is under no obligation to do so. C. The contract can be executed at no cost to the optionee. D. It is a bilateral agreement. S39. If a manufacturer that is the major employer in a small city moves its operations to another city, it is reasonable to expect a fall in housing demand, but no other changes in the real estate market. B. A decline in demand for all types of real estate in the real estate market. C. An immediate fall in the demand for industrial real estate, but no other changes in the real estate market. D. An immediate decline in the prices for industrial and office real estate, but no impact on the residential market. S40. If a commercial real estate market is undersupplied, it is likely that rental prices in that market will fall. B. Rental prices in that market will rise. C. Rental prices will remain stable until equilibrium is reached. D. Construction will increase to the point of equilibrium. S41. The amount of available property that becomes occupied over a period of time is called a vacancy. B. Absorption. C. Equilibrium. D. Occupation. S42. The roof of a property cost $20,000. The economic life of the roof is 20 years. Assuming the straight-line method of depreciation, what is the depreciated value of the roof after 3 years? A. $20,000. B. $17,000. C. $14,000. D. $3,000. S43. The income capitalization approach to appraising value is most applicable for which of the following property types? A. Single-family homes. B. Apartment buildings. C. Undeveloped land. D. Churches. S44. In the income capitalization approach, an appraiser A estimates gross income and multiplies times the gross income multiplier. B estimates effective income, subtracts tax, and applies a capitalization rate. C estimates net income and applies a capitalization rate to it. D estimates potential income and applies a capitalization rate to it. S45. Net operating income is equal to a potential income minus expenses minus debt service. B. Effective gross income minus potential income. C. Potential gross income minus vacancy and credit loss minus expenses. D. Effective gross income minus vacancy and credit loss. S46. If net income on a property is $40,000 and the cap rate is 10%, the value of the property using the income capitalization method is A. $100,000. B. $400,000. C. $1 million. D. $4 million. S47. The key feature of an adjustable mortgage loan is that A. The interest rate may vary. B. The monthly payment increases over the life of the loan. C. The principal balance does not amortize. D. The loan term can be shortened or lengthened. S48. Why is a wraparound mortgage loan potentially interesting to a home seller as an investment? A. It is a senior loan that can be easily subordinated for additional debt. B. A wraparound lender can profit when the interest rate of the wraparound exceeds that of the underlying mortgage. C. The underlying loan is retired early. D. The second mortgage borrower may make payments directly to the first mortgage lender. S49. A builder is required to secure a loan with mortgages on 3 properties. This is an example of a participation mortgage loan. B. A blanket mortgage loan. C. A permanent mortgage loan. D. A bridge loan. S50. Which of the following is true of a loan with negative amortization? A. The interest rate on the loan increases as the principal balance decreases. B. Payments are not sufficient to retire the loan. C. The loan balance is diminishing, or going negative. D. Additional interest is being added to the monthly payment. S51. The loan-to-value ratio is used as an underwriting mechanism because A. The LTV determines the profitability of the loan. B. The loan amount needs to be less than the property's value. C. Borrowers tend to inflate the true value of the property. D. A full-price loan overfinances the borrower. S52. In the past, borrowers were often surprised by unexpected or undisclosed borrowing fees and expenses at closing. This phenomenon has been largely corrected through disclosure requirements mandated by which of the following laws? A. Equal Credit Opportunity Act. B. Truth in Lending Law. C. National Disclosure Procedures Act. D. Federal Fair Housing Laws. S53. Which of the following is an important function of the secondary mortgage market? A. Participants borrow funds from banks so the banks can make more loans. B. Participants issue tax certificates and sell them to primary lenders. C. Participants purchase pools of defaulted loans from lenders to keep them solvent. D. Participants sell mortgage-backed securities in order to buy pools of loans. S54. Cash flow is a measure of how much pre-tax or after-tax cash an investment property generates. To derive cash flow, it is therefore necessary to exclude A. Cost recovery expense. B. Interest expense. C. Loan principal payments. D. Net operating income. S55. The method for deriving an investor's return on investment, or ROI, is by A. Dividing net operating income by cash flow. B. Multiplying the required yield times after-tax cash flow. C. Dividing net income by the price paid for the property. D. Multiplying cash flow times the price paid for the property. S56. Which of the following items would affect a homeowner's adjusted basis? A. Installing a higher capacity air conditioning and purifying system. B. Replacing a washing machine. C. Stripping and staining hardwood floors. D. Replacing a broken picture window. S57. Which of the following is true with respect to real property taxation by the federal government? A. It imposes ad valorem property taxes and capital gain tax. B. It may not impose property taxes or tax liens. C. There are no federal ad valorem taxes on real property. D. It imposes ad valorem tax, but not capital gain tax. S58. Ad valorem taxes are based on A. The replacement value of property. B. The assessed value of property. C. The millage value of property. D. The broker's estimate of value. S59. A retirement facility prohibits ownership of any unit by persons under 55 years of age. The association claims it has made the prohibition properly. Which of the following is true? A. They are violating the Civil Rights Act of 1866. B. They are violating the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. C. They are guilty of age discrimination. D. The prohibition may be legal if performed correctly. S60. An owner suddenly pulls a property off the market after hearing from the agent on the phone that the agent had received a full price offer from a minority party. The agent then informs the offerer that the home has been removed from the market and is unavailable. Which party or parties, if any, have violated fair housing laws? A. The agent only. B. The owner only. C. The agent and the owner. D. Neither agent nor owner. S61. Which of the following are examples of closing items not prorated between buyer and seller? A. Taxes. B. Inspection fees. C. Utilities. D. Condominium assessments. S62. Which of the following activities is not allowed under the Real Estate Settlements and Procedures Act? A. A broker having any business relationship with an insurance company that is involved in the broker's transaction. B. A broker pre-qualifying a buyer for a mortgage loan. C. A lender requiring a deposit from a borrower for a tax and insurance escrow account. D. A lender paying a fee to a broker for referring a borrower to the lender. S63. Which of the following communication records must, as opposed to should, be kept? A. Notes on every conversation. B. Copies of required communications to principals. C. Notes from company training sessions. D. Business cards of licensees one meets at open houses. S64. To minimize the risk of violating fair housing laws, a licensee should A. refuse to use terms that refer to or describe any of the classes of persons protected by the laws. B. Avoid working in neighborhoods that are predominantly occupied by a single ethnic group. C. Make discriminatory or derogatory remarks in conversation only, never in writing. D. Give better service to members of a protected class than is standard for other clients or customers. S65. What are tenant improvements? A. Modifications to a rental suite to conform to a tenant's usage specifications. B. Marketing programs that yield a higher quality of tenancy. Increased revenue resulting from a rise in rental rates. D. Increased occupancy resulting from a population increase in the market area. S66. For the proper handling of client and owner monies, a property manager is generally required to A. Deposit all funds every month in the management firm's central operating account. B. Employ a notary to witness and record every deposit or payment received. C. Maintain a special trust account in a qualified financial depository. D. Disperse all funds to their legal owners on a weekly basis. S67. Jennifer advised her clients they needed to paint their living room before showing the property. The walls of these rooms were all 8 high. The wall lengths were 14, 18, 16, and 18. If a gallon of paint covers 200 SF, how many whole gallons would the home sellers have to buy? A1B, 2C, 3D, 6S68. An investor just purchased a rectangular 2-acre retail lot for $250 a frontage foot. If she paid $100,000 total, what was the depth of the lot? A400B, 250C, 871D, 218S69. Andra can afford to spend $5,000 in closing costs to refinance her home. The lender quotes closing costs of $800 plus 2 points. The house appraised out at $240,000, and she can get an 80% loan. Can Annika afford to refinance? A. No, she is short by $64. B. No, she is short by $1,600. C. Yes, with $360 left over. D. Yes, she in fact breaks even. S70. A lender offers an investor a maximum 70% LTV loan on the appraised value of a property. If the investor pays $230,000 for the property, and this is 15% more than the appraised value, how much will the investor have to pay as a down payment? A. $93,150. B. $79,350. C. $90,000. D. $69,000. S71. A house is being appraised using the sales comparison approach. The house has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a patio. The appraiser selects a comparable house that has 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and no patio. The comparable house just sold for $100,000. A half bath is valued at $5,000, and a patio at $1,000. Assuming all else is equal, what is the adjusted value of the comparable? A. $100,000. B. $104,000. C. $96,000. D. $106,000. S72. A family purchased a $90,000 lot to build a custom home. At the date of closing, the lot was assessed at $84,550 and the tax rate was $1.91/$100 assessed valuation. When they completed the home, the assessment increased by $235,000 to include the new construction. If the monthly tax escrow is based on the assessed value, what will the monthly tax escrow be? A. $517. B. $6,096. C. $508. D. $367. S73. The James family purchased a home for $180,000 5 years ago and obtained an 80% LTV loan. Now the property has appreciated 25%. In addition, the loan has been paid down $11,000. What is the James's current equity in the home? A. $47,000. B. $81,000. C. $45,000. D. $92,000. S. 74. George and Mary have owned a rental house for 10 years. They bought it for $240,000 and estimated the land value at 25%. If the property is depreciated on a 39-year schedule, and appreciation totals 50% over the period, what is their gain if they sell the property today? A. $159,230. B. $166,150. C. $181,538. D. $120,000. S. 75. Adelpha's home is valued at $250,000. She has insurance coverage of $160,000 with an 80% co-insurance clause. If Adelpha has a damage claim amounting to $100,000, how much will she receive from her policy? A. $32,000. B. $60,000. C. $80,000. D. $100,000. S. 76. Which of the following is a requirement to be a Nevada Real Estate Commissioner? A. 4 years as an active Nevada real estate broker. B. 3 years as a Nevada real estate broker or 5 years as a broker salesperson. C. Participation as an agent in at least 25 real estate transactions. D. Nevada resident for at least 1 year. S. 77. Mary has promised to pay Jerry a fee to help sell her house. Jerry used to have a real estate license in another state, but is not currently licensed. When the house sells for less than Mary was hoping for, even with Jerry's help, she refuses to pay Jerry his fee. Can Jerry force Mary to pay him? A. No. Lacking a real estate license, Jerry cannot claim payment for performing the services of a real estate licensee. B. No. The listing was illegal, since it was only oral. C. Yes. The oral agreement is binding, even though Jerry had no license. D. No. Only Jerry's broker can pay Jerry, and he has no broker. S. 78. Little Bill wants to be a Nevada property manager when he grows up. What credentials will he need to obtain? A. A real estate license. B. A real estate license and a special permit. C. A real estate license and certification by a professional property management association. D. An associate degree from a recognized Nevada educational institution. S. 79. John's broker salesperson's license has just gone inactive. Now he is limited to A. Working as a salesperson. B. Performing activities that do not require a license. C. Assisting prospective buyers to prepare offers. D. Showing other agents' listings. S. 80. A seller's real property disclosure form must be delivered to the buyer. A. before an offer is presented. B. Upon acceptance of an offer. C. At least 3 business days before closing of the transaction. D. At least 10 days before the close of escrow. S81. On receipt of seller Sam's real property disclosure form, buyer Bertha has ________ to rescind the transaction. A. 3 calendar days. B. 4 calendar days. C. 4 working days. D. 5 weekdays. S82. A seller's real property disclosure form discloses a small crack in the house foundation. Before the closing of escrow, a small tremor causes the crack to enlarge. What is the seller required to do? A. Tell the escrow officer about the enlarged crack. B. Give the buyer a written promise to repair the crack after closing. C. Give the buyer written notice that the crack has worsened. D. Tell the broker about the enlarged crack. S83. All residential non-original sales transactions where the property is located in a common interest community require delivery of a appraisal report. B. Prospectus. C. Public offering statement. D. Resale package. S84. A property adjacent to some grazing land is being offered for sale. Before a buyer signs an offer to purchase, the seller must give him a open range disclosure. B. Rangeland disclaimer. C. Seller's real property disclosure form. D. Residential disclosure guide. S85. Brokers are required to retain transaction records for a period of a 1 year. B. 3 years. C. 5 years. D. 10 years. S86. A real estate salesperson enters into a written listing agreement with a client. She must deliver that agreement to her broker within a 1 business day. B. 3 working days. C. 5 calendar days. D. 5 working days. S87. Trust accounts must be reconciled within a 10 days of any new deposit. B. 15 days of receipt of any client funds. C. 30 days of receipt of the monthly bank statement. D. 45 days of the opening of escrow. S88. Salesperson Swift prepares a broker price opinion for a client. In so doing, has he violated any law or regulation? A. Yes. Only a broker may prepare a broker price opinion. B. Yes. Only a broker or broker salesperson may prepare a broker price opinion. C. No, as long as he has the opinion certified by an appraiser. D. No. Any real estate licensee may prepare a broker price opinion. S89. Along with a fully executed contract, a salesperson receives the buyer's earnest money deposit. She must pass this deposit to her broker within a 1 business day. B. 1 calendar day. C. 2 banking days. D. 3 business days. S90. In the absence of instructions to the contrary in the purchase agreement, a broker is allowed to do which of the following with an earnest money deposit? A. Deposit it in his personal account. B. Deposit it in his business operating account C. Pay some or all of it to the buyer D. Pay some or all of it to the seller S91. Sophia, a real estate salesperson, prepares an advertisement for the local newspaper. Which of the following items must, by law, be included in the ad? A. The name of Sophia's brokerage. B. Sophia's full name. C. Sophia's phone number. D. Sophia's license number S92. The name on Ike Creden's real estate license appears as Francis Creden. In his real estate advertising, Creden's name must appear as A. Francis Ike Creden. B. Francis I. Creden. C. Ike Creden. D. Francis Creden. S93. In Nevada, all real estate advertisements must A. Follow special regulations for advertising in electronic media. B. Include the name of the brokerage firm in the domain name. C. Include an email address or Facebook link. D. Include the name of the brokerage firm. S94. Condoleezza, a broker, needs help administering her office. Which of the following persons is she allowed to choose? A. Any licensee with an active license. B. Joe, a salesperson with 2 years active experience. C. Jenny, a broker salesperson. D. Mac, a salesperson who has a business brokerage permit and administrative experience. S95. An independent contractor agreement between a broker and a salesperson must contain a statement that the salesperson can set his own hours. B. A statement that all associated licensees are subject to the broker's supervision. C. A statement that the broker will not interfere with the salesperson's work. D. A declaration that the salesperson is not an employee. S96. Osgood and Harrison are real estate salespersons working in the same office. Osgood is overloaded with work, so he refers a seller to Harrison with the understanding that Harrison will pay him a percentage of his commission, if any, as a referral fee. On completing the transaction, Harrison presents Osgood with a check, as promised. In this case, A. Everyone has behaved according to the rules. B. The payment is a violation, only the broker can pay Osgood. C. The agreement is a violation, referral fees are not allowed in Nevada. D. The agreement is a violation, it should have been approved by the broker. S97. A buyer wants to make an offer on a house that is for sale by the owner. Before presenting the offer, the buyer's agent, Albert, must give the seller a duties owed by a Nevada real estate licensee Form B, a consent to act Form C, a copy of the brokerage agreement D, a compensation disclosure Form S98. The Lims have agreed to pay listing agent Thompson's commission for the sale of their daughter Jessica's house. What does Thompson have to disclose to prospective buyers about this agreement? A. Nothing, this is confidential information. B. Just the amount of the parents' contribution. C. Just the fact that the parents are paying the commission. D. Both the fact that the parents are paying the commission and the amount of their contribution. S99. A buyer's agent knows that a seller is financially distressed and needs a quick sale. Is the agent required to give this information to her client? A. Yes. She must disclose material facts concerning the transaction. B. Yes. She must disclose material facts relating to the property. C. No. The information is not a material fact requiring disclosure. D. No. She owes a duty of confidentiality to the seller. S. 100. Max proposes to subdivide his 20 acres into 40 parcels. Minnie plans to subdivide her 6 acres into 3 parcels. Ahab is going to subdivide his 100 acres into 25 parcels. Ishmael is dividing his 35 acres into 2-acre lots. Assuming no exemptions apply, which one, if any, is subject to Nevada subdivided land law? A. Max B. Minnie C. Ahab D. Ishmael. Section 7, Answer Key National Test 1, Rights, Interest.